Welcome everyone to this week's webinar. My name is Russell and I'll be your host for today's lesson on creating and editing details in Envisioneer. The main topics we'll cover today are creating a detail, adding information to that detail, making a block of a detail, inserting a block from another project, and finally importing and exporting details. After the formal portion of the presentation, there will be a question and answer session to tackle any questions you might have. So please feel free to type in your questions at any point throughout the course of the webinar and I will get to them at the end. So let's get started. When it comes to creating details in Envisioneer, you have options. They can either be clipped directly from your model or they could be pre-drawn standard details that you've previously created and imported and inserted on a worksheet. So we're going to cover both. Let's start with clipping a detail from an Envisioneer model. So as you can see on the screen, this is a fairly simple model, but it'll be a good basis for the details we're going to create today. So here on the foundation location, you can see that there is a stem wall, some footings, there's an interior stud wall here, and there's also a set of stairs leading up to the ground floor. And then if we have a look at our ground floor location quickly, you can see on here, again, that we've got a brick veneer wall. Exterior, we've got our framing defined for the floor, and we've got a hole cut in the floor for the stairs. So the first thing we want to do when we're going to create a detail is we first need to generate a section. So to create a section, we're going to come down to the bottom of the screen here to the section button, and we're going to click that drop-down arrow and choose Create New Section. So we're going to position our cursor outside of the building. As you can see, I'm just on the left side here. I'm going to click. I'm going to drag my mouse across, my cursor across till I get to the other side. Left click again. And that's going to define the line, the cut line, where we're cutting through the building. And as you can see, as I drag down and up, the next thing we need to do is define the direction of the view of the section. So I want to look up in this direction. And then you can see I've got another line here projecting above the section marks. And this is going to define the depth of the section that we're going to cut. So if I was to leave it as is and click now, then we would not see the far wall. So if I want to have the full depth go through and see the far wall beyond, when I cut my sections, I'm going to come up here until I am outside of the building again. And then to complete this, I will left click. And as you can see, we're immediately taken into the preview of that section. So the other thing you'll notice is that on the right-hand side of the screen, there is the section properties dialog that appears. And at the top of that here, you can see I'm just highlighting it now. You can give this any name you want for your section. If you don't like numbered sections, you can call it whatever you like, so you'll be able to remember it when you're going to insert it later. I'm just going to leave it as section 1 for today. The next thing you'll notice is that you can also here define the text that is contained in the marks. Now I am going to change this. I like mine to start with an S, so I'm going to call this S1. And the other option you have here is you could change the text style of the text in the marks if you wanted to. Again, I'm just going to leave this with the standard settings for today. So if we quickly cycle back to our floor plan view and model view, our 2D plan view, you can see there that that updated the nomenclature of the marks for the section to S1. So now we have a section. We need to insert it onto a worksheet. So I'm going to go to my details worksheet. And as we learned in last week's webinar on smart views, to insert a smart view, we are going to click on the Smart View button, choose Define Smart View, and we're going to complete this dialog. So the first thing we need to do is to choose our section tab here, so we can see our sections. And then you'll see just below that is a drop-down list where if we had multiple sections, this is where we would go in and choose them. I've just got the one, so we'll go ahead and choose that. The next thing to call your attention to is just on the right here where my cursor is, there's a preview window where we get a preview of the section that we're going to insert. And the rule to remember here is that what you see is what you get in terms of what it's going to insert in the Smart View. So whatever you see contained in this preview window pane is exactly what we'll insert onto your worksheet. So with that in mind, one of the things I want to change is I'm going to use my view filter because I notice here that there's a number of things not showing in my section. So I open up my view filter dialog. The first thing I want to check maybe is to make sure that my terrain is turned off, and indeed it is in this case. The next thing I want to do is I want to show all the framing because this is a section, so we want to get into looking at how this building is built. So I'm going to unlock my ceilings, my floors, my roofs, and my walls. And I am going to click Display All and click OK. And you can see immediately there's a number of items now showing in the preview window that were not previously. There's a roof which wasn't shown. There's framing here. So I need to zoom out. So I'm going to use my Zoom Extents button to make sure we're getting all of this when we insert it. And just one note to keep in mind is that by zooming in and out in the preview window is not going to affect your scale of insertion. It's just for positioning and cropping what you want inserted. The scale itself is going to be defined by this scale drop-down box here under Properties on the left-hand side. So the first insertion I'm going to do is I'm going to set it at 1/4 inch equals a foot scale. This is going to be my main reference section to start with. So I'm going to choose that, and I'm going to go ahead and click Insert. And we'll just place this here in the upper corner of the worksheet. Let's zoom in on that using our zoom window tool, get a closer look. So you can see here in this section we've inserted, we've got all of our framing, our slabs, our wall systems, our stairs, everything's showing here nicely on this section. So now that we have a main section to reference our details to, let's blow up a portion of this to create a detail at a larger scale where we can get in close and really see what's going on. So today what I want to create a detail of is a wall section of the lower portion of the building. So the first thing I'm going to do is go up to my Draw tab here, and I'm going to use some of my drafting tools to create a detailed bubble. So just as an indicator for what area we're going to blow up. So I'm going to insert one circle there. I'm going to duplicate that to the top of the area where I want to see. And then I'm going to draw some vertical lines from the outer apex of each circle on both sides to create my bubble. I click Finish, and now I'm going to go into my Modify tab, and I'm going to use my Trim tool here to trim this to lose the lower part of this circle and the upper part of this one to create a single detail identifier. So I'm going to choose the items I want to use that are going to trim, which are my two lines on the right and the left. I'm going to right click and choose Enter, and then I'm going to choose the items I want to trim and hit Escape. So I've created a detail bubble around the areas where I want to insert a blow up detail. I'll just zoom out to show you that in a little bit wider view. So now let's insert a detail, a blow up of this area. So again, we need to go to our Insert tab, or we could use our Insert drop-down menu at the top here. Go to Smart Views, define Smart View. And again, I need to access the same section, so I go to my Section tab, I choose Section 1. This time, I do want to set my scale to 1/2 inch for this detail. And just a reminder here that when a Smart View is inserted onto a drawing sheet, it can be inserted at any scale. What I find helpful is to have the scale of the view match the scale of the drawings when possible. Though you can have Smart Views of varying scales on a single sheet. Especially with details though, when we might be doing some dimensioning or measuring, it's just very helpful to have the view inserted at the same scale as the sheet so that when we're going to add dimensions or add details and we're typing in numeric commands into our commander window, they're going to be drawn at the scale of the detail. So I've already gone and pre-adjusted the scale of the worksheet view for this details worksheet to 1/2 inch equals a foot also. We won't go into detail on how to do this today, as it will be covered in another upcoming webinar. But anyways, just a good tip to keep in mind. So again, with this section, we're going to want to open up our view filter. We're going to unlock all of our items so we can turn on our framing. And we're going to make sure that we're zoomed out. To start, now in this case, we are going to take advantage of the what you see is what you get principle. And we're going to move our view, and then we're going to zoom in. So we're going to crop this so that we're only going to see exactly what we want to see on the worksheet. And maybe I'll just zoom in a little closer. Again, remembering the zoom scale itself is not going to actually affect the scale of the insertion. So I'm ready to go here. I'm going to go ahead and click Insert. And you can see now I've got that on my cursor. I will just place that beside this other larger 1/4 inch overall section to the left. So now that we've got this 1/2 inch scale detail inserted, let's just zoom in here for a closer look. So you can see here now, when we come in, we can see our framing at the floor and the top of the wall. We can see our footing and our stem wall here. Now, one thing's come to my attention, what I'm seeing here, I am seeing my trim, which I don't necessarily maybe want to see in this blow up section. So I can select my view. I can come over here to the Object Properties panel, click on Redefine Settings. I can go back into my view filter. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to turn the trim off, actually. And then you see it's slightly readjusted my position, so I'm just going to drag this back over here like so. Go ahead and click Update. And you can see that updated my view. I'm just going to move it down a bit so it's more aligned with the bottom of the other view. So the next thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to add some things to this, but before I do that, I'm going to want to come in here and maybe eliminate some of these extra lines that I don't need. This line along the top and here, this box that's been created by the edge of the Insert Preview window. So I'm going to come back over to my Object Properties panel here on the right, and this time I'm going to click on Edit Definition. Now this is going to take me inside of the block where I can perform edits that will be preserved. So I'm going to eliminate all those lines along the top, Similarly, I'm going to remove these lines on the left. And I notice there's just a couple of other small anomalies projecting through here. Just clean this up. Get rid of some unwanted line work and hit escape. And you see I'm back outside of my block. It's still an intact block. It's good to go, and we can add more to it now. So just one thing to keep in mind when you are editing the definition of a block is to remember that once you've done this work, if for any reason you were to come back and redefine the settings again or update the contents of this view, because maybe you made a change in the model or something, you would lose all this edit work you just did, and the view is going to revert back to referring to the original model that it's connected to. So just to try to be sure that before you start editing the definition of a block of an inserted view that you're finished with any of those kinds of adjustments. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to add some more detail to our wall section. So we're going to use some of the tools available here on our Draw tab. So you can see here at the end we've got polygon hatch, and there's a boundary hatch, and then there's also this details button. And you'll see in here there's a number of different options to quickly add information to a detail. So the first thing I want to do is I want to add some cut lines to define the cut edge of my detail section. So I'm going to add a cut line up at the top here. Just come a little bit outside the wall, and then I'm going to use my snap track to infer that edge here, and click. And I got my line. I'm going to repeat that and draw one coming down the other way here, just beyond. Snap that down. Okay. So I've got cut lines inserted, so let's go back to our detail button. And one of the other things I can quickly and easily do here is I can add some wood section marks. So I'm going to come in anywhere that I'm cutting through wood members, like that sill plate there. I'm going to do my floor joist members. And to work on this tool, you simply click on one corner, drag straight up or straight across, and then extend to get out to the other edge. So it's 3 clicks. Do that again here for this other sill plate sitting on top of our stem wall. We've got another couple of top plates here in this interior 2x4 stud wall inside of our foundation wall. So I'll add my wood section marks to those. And I got one last one, this sill plate on the bottom sitting on the basement slab down here. So I've got my section lines in, I've got my wood section marks. I'm going to move on and add some other details under this detail button. So we've got bad insulation, as you can see, that we can add. So if these were cavity stud walls that were filled with bad insulation, again, click once, click twice, and then extend for the thickness. Show you that again one more time for this lower portion here. So we'll click repeat, click once, the inside corner of the stud, come down to this lower inside corner, and then I'm dragging it across, and you can see it fills up that whole cavity there with bad insulation pattern. So there's bad insulation, and then the other option we have available to us under this details button is rigid insulation. So I can come down here, say, to below my floor slab. And I'm going to click in that corner there where the slab meets the footing, come across out to this cut line edge. And in this case, I don't necessarily want to have insulation come all the way down to the bottom of the footing. I might just need 2 inches here. So just draw your attention to the commander window down here in the bottom left corner, and you can see we can type in and set a distance there. So just quickly show you that again. Click those 2 corners, drag down, click 2, enter. There we go. We've got our rigid insulation shown below our slab. You can set it at any thickness we want. Well, there's one other option available to you here under this detail button that would apply nicely in this case, which is our masonry section tool. I've got a brick veneer exterior wall, so as you can see here, I can choose to insert either a brick or a block type of section depending on your wall. I can set the properties of the height, the width, the joint height, and the joint width. I'm happy with all these preset details, but you could modify them. I'm going to click OK. Again, it's a simple 3-click process. We're going to start down at the bottom here, come up to the top, and then just drag in the direction we want it to apply. And presto, there we've got our brick veneer section detail applied to our wall section. So the next tools we're going to look at are our hatching tools. As I mentioned, there's a polygon hatch and there's also a boundary hatch tool. I'm going to use the boundary hatch tool first, and the first thing I want to use that for, just adjusting my zoom here. So this stem wall here is a poured concrete stem wall. So I'm going to use my boundary hatch tool to insert a concrete pattern. Now, as you can see, as it happens, that happens to be pre-selected in the style here. There are a number of built-in default patterns in Envisioneer that you can choose from. You can also go out here to look at other patterns that might be available. You can see there's this load button here. You could click on and you could choose to load in your own pattern files if you wished. If you have a bunch you like to use that you use in other CAD editing software, you can import them and use them here in Envisioneer. So in this case, I'm happy with concrete. I'm going to reset the scale here to 1, which it would usually set to by default, just to show you how that looks. You can see down in the bottom left corner here, I can choose to use the default hatch origin, or I can specify my own, in which case it would enable this pick point button here, where I can go in and specify that if I want. I'm just going to use the default. The next thing is to choose, do I want the boundary line around it or not, or do I just want the pattern? In this case, I think I will include the boundary. And then, of course, what I need to do now is to select my boundaries. So I need to click on this button in the upper right corner. And you can see as I move my cursor around, it's going to create a dotted field around the edge of any definable contained area that has an identifiable perimeter. So in this case, I'm inside my stem wall. I'm going to go ahead and click. You can see that it turned green. It's highlighted green now, that line around the perimeter. If there were more areas I wanted to choose, I could go ahead and select more areas. I'm done for now, so I'm going to right click and choose enter. That's going to bring me back to my dialog. And I'm going to, you see here I have an option to click a preview button. And that's going to show me a preview of what it's going to look like. I don't mind that. I'm going to go ahead and click finish. Maybe what I want to do is just adjust the scale of that hatch pattern So that's as simple as selecting it, and you can see in our object properties panel on the right-hand side here, there's a scale field where I can type in that I want it to be half the size, so I'll change it to 0.5, and you see that immediately change the scale. That's a little bit nicer scale for this scale of detail. Just highlight this hatch pattern again and show you that you could come in here again now and change the pattern itself if you wanted. You could change the angle of the pattern. You could specify the origin if you wanted. Number of things you can do once a hatch pattern is inserted to adjust it. You could change the drafting layer. For instance, I might want to put this on my CAD layer, and I might want to come down here in my layer control drop panel and get back onto my CAD layer so that everything is being inserted on the correct layer. So let's just use our boundary hatch tool again one more time to show you how that works. I pick my pattern, I check my scale. I know now that I like a 0.5 scale. So I'm going to change that right away. I do want to include the boundary again, and I definitely want the pattern, so I just have to select my boundaries. In this case, I'm going to choose to do the footing. When I'm done, you see it's highlighted. Right-click, choose Enter, come back here, click OK. So I've added pattern fill to my stem wall and my footing. Now I'm going to do my floor slab. So for this time around, I'll show you how the polygon hatch tool works. This tool is going to allow us to draw our own boundary. You could choose to, this would allow you to enclose. For instance, if this left edge of the floor slab for some reason was not enclosed, this would allow you to enclose it. If you only wanted to show the hatch running through part of the slab and leave the rest open, just white space and line work, which might be something common you would do on an exterior elevation, for instance, depending on the style of drawing you like to work in. So let's open up this tool by clicking on it. You can see it's a less sophisticated dialog box here. We still have our options to include or not boundary line. In this case, I'm going to uncheck that. I've already got perimeter lines around my slab. I do need to select my pattern. So again, I'm going to come in here and choose concrete. And one thing I'll show you while we're inside this dialog box is that this is another place we can come and edit the pattern. So we could come in here if we knew, for instance, this is the default setting of the scale here, 2000.00. If we knew that all the time we use a certain scale of drawing for our details, and we know we want our pattern to always insert at a certain scale without having to think about it and change it every time we do it, we could come in here and permanently change the default scale. So I could cut that in half if I wanted, or any multiple, and you can see there's all kinds of other options here for editing the pattern. So I'll just get out of here. So we've got concrete chosen, going to click OK, and we're going to click OK, and that's going to take us now out to our drawing, where we actually have to come in here and by clicking points around the perimeter, we're defining that boundary. When we've defined all points of the exterior, we can right-click and choose Finish. Yeah, it looks like it did insert there. It looks like it's just the origin and the scale are set funny for some reason, so it's you can just see the dots. Anyway, let's move on to some of the other tools we have available to us to augment our details. So let's go to the Tools tab. What you can see here, you have a number of text insertion options. So you can add text and descriptions to your details. You can also add dimensions of all sorts if you wanted to. This is going to be covered during next week's webinar in more detail. So I'm just going to do a single insertion of text here to give this wall section detail a title. So the first thing I'm going to do is type in the name in the text editor pane, wall section detail 01. And the next thing I'm going to want to do is maybe define the text style. So let's choose notes and let's try inserting that and we'll see how that looks. So you can see that's attached to my cursor. It's maybe a little small, so if I wanted to change that, I could double click on it and that's going to reopen the text dialog. And I can change the size here, or I could change the style. I also might just want to underline this to define it a little better. So let's try that, and that looks a little nicer. So let's just move it over maybe. Give it a little space there. So that's how you would add text. There's a number of other tools. Again, as I said, we're going to cover that next week. So this detail is looking really good. We've added a lot of information to it. Let's just say we totally completed it and had all of our notes and any dimensions we want, any information, and we wanted to save this detail so we can use it again on other projects in the future. So how do we do that? So to do this, we need to first define all of these separate elements that we've inserted. We have the original block, and then we have all these other details we've added and the title. We want to group them all together. We want to create a block. So we're going to go to Insert, Blocks, Define Block. So the first thing we need to do here is we need to give it a name. So let's stick with wall section detail 01. The next thing we need to do is we need to define the base point. So we need to define when it's going to insert in the future, what's that reference point going to be. So I'm going to click on that. Now, if you like, you could choose this top left corner. You could choose the bottom left corner of your text. I'm going to choose the center of my footing. You see, I come back here to the dialog. It's telling me the base point is defined. So the next thing I need to do is I need to select my object. So I'm going to click on this Select Object button. I'm going to draw a window around this whole group of elements. You can see it's all highlighted green. So when I know I've got everything selected, I'm going to right-click, choose Enter. And then the last thing I need to decide is what do I want Envisioneer to do with the elements that are already in the drawing that I created this detail with. So do I want to retain these in their original state? Do I want to convert them to a block in the drawing in this project? Or do I want to delete them? So in this case, I want to retain them. You can see I've got 20 objects selected, and I'm going to click OK. So I've created a block. Now this, as I said, because of the choices we made in the dialog, remains a group of independent elements, so we could continue to work on it and edit it if we need it. So how can we insert this footing detail that we just created into another file or share it with others? So we have a few options. So the first thing we want to do is just to show you how would we insert it again in this project. So we would simply go to Insert, Blocks, Insert Block. We are going to choose our wall section detail 01 block from the drop-down menu. You see there, that's the block created. It's popped it on my cursor, and in this case, it's inserted as a single block. So how do we get it into another file if we wanted to? So let's say we wanted to get it into another Envisioneer file. In the future, we're working on a new project. We remember this great wall section detail we created. How do we insert it? So again, under the Insert menu, under Blocks, you'll see you have this option here, Insert Block from File. So when I choose this is going to take me out to my folder navigator, and I'm going to be able to navigate through all my folders here, and I can choose any BLD file, any other Envisioneer project file where I knew that there was a detail I wanted to insert, and I could open it up, and I could pick a block out of any of those to insert. So that's how you would insert an Envisioneer block into another Envisioneer project file. So one tip to keep in mind that could be helpful for you is to save yourself some time and stay organized. It's very helpful to create for yourself a blank Envisioneer drawing file called blocks or details, whatever makes more sense to you. And every time you create a block or a detail, insert a copy of it in that blocks or details file. And that way, you always have a copy of these blocks and details at your fingertips, and you don't have to go searching, trying to remember which file did I create that in. So you do have some other options. One is to export your detail as a DWG or DXF file. So I'm going to walk you through how we would do this. So starting with, first thing we would want to do is select all the items that we want to export as a detail. I'm going to go to Edit, Copy. Then I'm going to go to my blank worksheet, and here I'm going to edit, paste everything. So the reason I'm going to a blank worksheet is because when we're going to go to export this as a DWG file, everything on the sheet is going to be exported. In this case, for instance, the title block would also be exported. So I actually don't want that, so I'm going to go ahead and delete the title block. You could just have a blank worksheet for yourself in your template file where you would do this kind of work. And you can see all that's contained now is this original detail that I created. So now that I have only that on my worksheet, I can go ahead and choose File, Export, 2D Drawing. And you see I can choose if I want a DWG or a DXF file. I would then tell it where I want it to go. I would give it a name, and then I would save it. So you could save this to a folder on your computer where you keep all of your DWG or DXF detail files, and then you would be able to import that back into Envisioneer later. You would just click on Save, and then you would have your DWG or DXF file. Your other option is if you are someone who likes to work in a different CAD editing software and you prefer to make final adjustments or refinements of your 2D details in that software. When you have all the elements selected that you want to copy, again, you could just come up here and go to Edit, Copy, and that's going to actually transfer all of that information to your computer clipboard. And if you had another CAD editing software open, you could go in and paste directly all the information from Envisioneer into your CAD editing software. So now that we've covered exporting, let's look at how do we import CAD files. So let's go back to our details page, and let's just zoom out. So to import a CAD file, a DWG or a DXF file from somewhere else, something you already made for yourself or something, a great detail you found on the internet, on a manufacturer's website or something that you want to import as is or jazz up here in Envisioneer, you just go to Insert and choose Import CAD File, or alternately from the drop-down menu here at the top. Again, you see that's going to open up our File Navigator window here in this open dialog. So here you could navigate to anywhere on your computer to look for any file you want to import. By default, you're going to be taken here to this Envisioneer 12 Drafting Objects folder where we have preloaded a number of details for you. As you can see, there's quite a long list here, all different sorts of common details that may be useful to you when creating the details for your construction project. You can even see here there's a bonus CAD details folder with more folders. Each of them has multiple options of different kinds of very specific details. So let's just go back to the main details folder, and I'm going to choose this Beam Pocket DWG file to import. I click the Open button, and you can see that opens up this import dialog. So the first thing you can see is that in our preview window to the right, we can see what this detail looks like that we want to import. And so if we like it as is, we would just go ahead and click Insert. Maybe you want to crop it, so you can click the Set Crop box, and I can choose maybe I only want this upper part. So I've done that. In this case, I don't. I'm going to clear that crop box. I can also adjust the dimming percentage if I was importing something that I wanted to trace over. In this case, I want it to be live and editable and full weight, so I'm going to leave it. And then the last thing to look at is, of course, is scale. So you see you've got this and you've got these choose scale tools. Now, if your size, your scale, you can see this is a 1/2 inch equals a foot detail, which is great because that's how my worksheet's set up. If for some reason you needed to do a conversion factor because the detail scale doesn't match the scale of the worksheet, you could just come in here and type this, double it in size or make it half the size or a quarter of the size or 4 times the size, whatever the conversion factor would be to get it to represent properly on your worksheet. So that's where you would do that. In this case, as I said, my detail scale matches the scale of my view. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to click Insert. You can see it on my cursor there. I drop it down. Just going to zoom in on this detail. So there is my inserted DWG detail. So as you can see, when I select this detail, it is a single block, everything selected. This also means, like any other block, like the ones I created, that I can go ahead and I can edit the definition of the block. So if I click on Edit Definition over here in Object Properties, I could now come inside here, and if I wanted to move this text, or if I wanted to change the text or the style, If I wanted to delete any of these lines, if I wanted to make any adjustments I want to make, I can come in here simply by selecting the block, clicking on Edit Definition. That takes me inside the block where all of these items remain as individual editable elements. I can even change my hatch pattern if I want to blow that up because I like that scale better. Any changes you want to make. Then when you're done, you just hit Escape, and that's saved. And again, you could save it the same way we saved the other block so that all those changes you make to this imported block are saved for future reuse. So that concludes the formal portion of the presentation today. So I'm just about to start on a quick recap of what we learned. While I'm doing that, if you do have any questions, please take the opportunity now to fill them out in the panel on the right side of your screen, and I will get to those as soon as I finish this quick recap. So let's just go back to our model and just remember, so the first thing we did was we created this section. A simple 3-click process. We made some adjustments to the naming of the section. We then have a section defined, which we can look at here. And this is where we would create a new section when we're in floor plan view. So we need to do that before we can insert it onto a worksheet. And then we came into our worksheet space and we inserted a smart view. We open up this dialog. We used the preview pane to get the positioning of exactly what we want inserted. We used our view filter dialog to turn things on and off to control what we would see in the worksheet view. We set our scale here. We decided which section we want, and then we inserted. So that's how we get a section onto the worksheet. Once it's inserted, we know that we have a full set of tools available to edit the detail and add further information. First thing we have here is we have our edit definition option where we can go inside and make changes to the detail. We have our drawing tools, all these lines and shapes. We have our 2 different hatching tools, and we have all of these detail tools here under the Details button. We also have the Modify tab where we can use any of these tools to adjust any of our inserted or created line work. And then, of course, we also have our text and dimensioning tools here on the Tools tab. So all kinds of tools to add all the information you need as you're creating your detail. Then we learned about creating blocks, how to define blocks. So once we've finished a detail, we come up here to Insert Blocks, Define Block, and we work our way through this dialog. We pick our base point, we select our objects, we give it a name, and we create a block. We learned how to insert a block from another file. We learned that it's helpful to create a master file to store all your detail blocks in. We then learned about exporting and importing DWG and DXF format files. So to export, we go to File, Export, 2D Drawing, remembering that first we placed only our detail onto a worksheet all by itself and made sure there was nothing else on there that we wanted exported. And to import, we go to Import CAD File, and we choose a file from our navigator, and insert, as with the one that we did insert here. So that finishes up our recap of what we learned today. So I'm just going to have a look in the question panel to see if there are any questions that have already come in. If not, again, this would be your last chance to type up any questions you have at all into that panel on the right-hand side of your screen, the GoToWebinar panel. I don't see any that have come in yet, but I'm going to leave this open here for just one more minute to give you another chance if anything's come up at all. Please feel free. In the meantime, I'll just remind you that we will be sending you out an email with a PDF booklet that recaps all of the information that we covered today. And of course, we will also be posting a link of the recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel, as well as in the webinar archive section of our website. So you can always go back there and watch it again if there's anything you missed or a section you want to go and slow down and review. Just having one last look here in the question panel, not seeing any questions in here. So I'm going to wrap this up for today. Thanks very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. Hope that it was helpful, and we will see you next week.